Hello, my name is Jimmy Garagorri. I'm Customer Operations Engineer for the Cloudera support team in the Americas East, and we are here to show you how to deploy an HDP cluster using Cloudbreak, an external MySQL database for the Ambari Server. For this video, we will be covering a general architecture with the steps required to complete this setup in a live demonstration, passing from a basic MySQL Server installation, configuring the users, permissions, and database required to deploy an HDP cluster using Cloudbreak and MySQL as external database for Ambari Server. For this demo, we will be using OpenStack as cloud provider. Basically, we only need a MySQL and a Cloudbreak instance running. The first step will be associated with the MySQL server, where we will be creating the user with permissions to establish a connection from Ambari and the database where the schema will be deployed. After this, from Cloudbreak interface, we will be creating an external configuration to use the previous database created. Since we will be using MySQL database, we need to provide the drivers to allow the connection. For this, from the same interface, as a cluster extension, we will create a recipe with the instructions to install the MySQL connector before Ambari starts. Now, we can deploy an HDP or HDF cluster using those resources. During this process, we will be attaching the recipe and the database configuration during the cluster creation wizard. After the infrastructure in the cloud provider is created, Ambari will be executing the custom recipe to download the connector. Then we'll be deploying the schema into the database, and finally, we'll start to deploy the cluster using the blueprint provided. In the following slides, we will be showing some snippets of the configuration we will be following to complete this setup. In this case, basic Linux command to install and enable MySQL Server. Once the MySQL binary is installed, we will be connecting to MySQL to create the user, set permissions to allow the remote connection, and finally, we will be creating the database to use for Ambari Server. With this basic script, we are installing a MySQL connector and making it available in the folder OPT JDBC drivers. From Cloudbreak interface, we need to provide the name to reference this configuration to be able to attach it to a particular cluster. We will notice a warning message when select MySQL JDBC connection. Basically, we don't need to specify the jar URL if we set the drivers as part of a custom image or we provide the drivers using a custom recipe. Let's start with the configuration. We need to add MySQL repository. Now we need to install MySQL Server. And enable and start the MySQL Server on boot. To complete the MySQL setup, we need to identify the initial password. Then we need to execute the MySQL secure installation script that allows to improve the security of MySQL Server installation. We need to provide this password. Now it's time to execute some commands in MySQL to create a user, database, and permissions. Let's see what are the connections active now for this server. As you can see, only the MySQL server is up and running. Since we already have the configuration in the database. Now let's go to the Cloudbreak UI and create a pre-Ambari start recipe to install the MySQL connector. To do that, we are going to the Cloudbreak UI, cluster extensions, recipes, create recipe. We need to provide a name. Type pre-Ambari start, and we are going to paste the script. Create. Now we are going to configure the external source, database configuration, register database configuration, create a name for that configuration, will be a configuration for Ambari, will be MySQL connection. As you can see here, all the drivers will be set in this folder. Now we need to use the user and the password. Register. Now we can proceed to create a cluster. Click on clusters, create cluster, click on advanced, set the cluster name, pick up the cluster, blueprint, next, default images, default instance. We're not going to use this. We need to attach the recipe. The configuration for MySQL. We need to accept this warning. We're not going to use gateway for this demo. We accept default. We will be providing a password for Ambari. And my private key. Create cluster. Now we're going to wait until the configuration complete, set the infrastructure, and we can double check all the configurations in the Ambari server. Now let's go to the Ambari server and see if the custom recipe was in place. As you can see, it was success. Let's check the log. Was executed successfully. So we can go to MySQL and check the connections in the server. Now you can see the connections from the Ambari, and we can go to the Cloudbreak UI to validate if everything is working as expected. Based on our blueprint, we only install a Zookeeper server, and we can hear in the Ambari operations, everything was installed as expected. With this, we already have all the steps executed. Now Ambari is using an external database using MySQL server. Finally, I hope this video was informative for you, and I want to thank you for watching.